There are times in our life when we do not have strength or even money to give, but a gift can be a kind word, a phone call, or even an inspirational quote. Here are two short stories from my book, 30 Days at the Shore, Letters to Father. I hope they will inspire you to remember someone who taught you to give. Grandmother Tucker. My grandmother was born in Stanley County, North Carolina. A serious illness impaired her eyesight, but still she loved to read and even completed her studies to become a nurse. She married young and had 5 children. During the Depression years, the family struggled. There were many families that lost everything and were forced to live like gypsies. Things we now take for granted were precious then, such as not having enough plates and utensils to set the table. Such was the case for my grandmother with 5 children. At mealtime, she waited until someone had finished. Then she rinsed off the plate and made her meal on what was left. She did, however, have her own drinking vessel, which was a mason jar. One day a man knocked on the back door. He asked for water from their well for his homeless family. She gave him her mason jar and told him to take what he needed. She watched as the family all drank from the same jar. When the man returned, she told him he could keep the jar. That simple jar was a treasure to the man. Until times got better, my grandmother waited for the next empty cup to drink. My grandmother lived her life by the rule, waste not, want not. I have fond memories of my grandmother drinking iced tea out of a mason jar while sitting on the front porch swing and singing hymns. My next story is about Mrs. Troutman. When I was first married, we bought a small house and remodeled it. We were the next to the last house on the street. Living in the in-house was a Mrs. Troutman, whom I assumed was a widow. I considered her to be very old. Perhaps that was just because I was viewing through youthful eyes. As I rushed off to work, I could see her outside working in her garden, tending her flowers or hanging her clothes on the line. In the evening when I returned, she would be sitting in the rocker on the front porch, most often asleep. Not long after we had settled in, she knocked on the door with a paper bag in her hand. "I have a housewarming gift for you," she said. "It ain't much, but I know when you're setting up house you don't have much. I think you'll find these useful." I thanked her, and what's inside, I opened the paper bag to find an assortment of clean glass jars. I thought it a strange gift, but nevertheless I placed them carefully under the sink. Sure enough, there were many times I reached for those jars. Mrs. Troutman would wave at me as I came and went, but she never came to visit again. I later learned from a neighbor that her husband left to go out for cigarettes and never returned. She was a young woman at the time. She never married and lived alone the rest of her life. Oh, how she must have agonized, and how lonely she must have been. We moved away, and now looking back over the years, I often wonder what happened to her. Just like the jars were a simple gift, I could have given her the simple gift of my company. Who knows what wisdom she could have shared with me? Sadly, I consider myself too busy and missed the opportunity. However, her simple gifts of jars will always remind me what's important is not what you give, but that you give. Today, if you visit my home, you will find an assortment of glass jars under the sink. Happy Easter, everyone.